Goodness.
Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to be talking to you because I have the amazing Zoë Routh with me, who just won her book People Stuff, has just won Australian Business Book of the Year, which is an amazing effort. Go mad, yay. Welcome, Zoë.
Oh, Ral, I'm so happy to be here. It's always wonderful to chat with you.
Yeah. So let's, before we get to the book of the year, first of all, it was finalist in book cover. So, that's pretty good. And the amazing Lynn Kazali has a obviously did that. I am going to take a little bit of credit because it's my, quote at the top. So Lynn and I will bask in your glory. It was also finalist of the leadership book of the year. And then it was winner of the best management and HR book, but then took out the entire category of the best book in Australia for 2020, which is amazing because I reckon in lockdown, people wrote a lot of books this year.
Yeah.
So tell us how you felt. Tell us what winning the award means to you.
Well, when I discovered I had won the award, it wasn't during the ceremony because I managed to forget about that. It was somebody sent me an email saying, congratulations, no context with that email. And I'm like, what? For what? Then I realized he was one of the judges at the ABBA Awards. And I went, I wonder if I got one of the prizes. So I went in, I was scouring Twitter looking for something, somebody tweeting something. And then I found it. It was the announcement of Book of the Year. And there was my book cover and a picture of me sitting there in a tweet with a congratulations, you won Book of the Year. And I just stared at it and I couldn't talk. And all I could do was call out to my husband, Rob, look. And he's like, what? And I'm like, he's like, what does this mean? I'm like, I won the big one.
That is so amazing. I can't believe you forgot about the awards because I entered my book in last year. And I don't know, I was just so excited, waiting for the awards to come. And when I actually was a finalist, that blew me away. And I could just only imagine what it felt like to win Book of the Year because it is an amazing accomplishment.
It is gobsmacking, and I'm still a bit stunned with it. It's only been a week since the awards came through, and to win like 4 badges. 4 badges that I now have.
Show us all so you get little stickers. Cool.
So that's the Book of the Year ones. And then the 3 are the 2 finalists and winning management and HR. So that was just gobsmacking. Yeah, forgetting to go to the awards was pretty hilarious. And to be honest, it came because I actually avoided it. I didn't totally forget. I avoided it because I had put in for our podcast and the podcast awards. And I thought for sure we were a shoe-in then. And we got nothing, no finalists, nothing. I'm like, screw this award thing. So I figured the book thing would be a reiteration of that. And I selfishly didn't even want to support my fellow authors. I'm just like, screw it. I'm not going to that thing. Let's put all this effort in. I was feeling a bit of self-pitying. And then, of course, I get the email. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe it. So
the one good thing it wasn't in person. Imagine if it was an in-person event and you just decided not to go because you wouldn't win. They would be madly ringing you going, get here. And so luckily it was only virtual, so that's okay.
Yeah.
And yes, if you've got a question for Zoë, just type it in and we will ask Zoë that. So Zoë, I know when I write a book, there's often a catalyst. There's often a point where I just sort of go, I need to write a book about this. So was there a catalyst for you writing this book?
Yeah, it's probably 2. One, it was just this endless realization that when I talk to leaders that their challenge is always, like when I asked them, what's your primary challenge? And they always said some version of, it's the people stuff. It's the tensions on my executive team that aren't performing. I've got an underperformer, or I want my executive team to step up, or I've got challenges interacting with the board, or the board's got challenges with the staff. And there's always some element of the people dynamics that was a problem. So that was the sort of genesis of the idea around people stuff. Then I spent a strategic planning day with my mentors, Matt Church and Peter Cook, where we talked about how do we want to position the work that I do? It's leadership, and what is that really about? And we spent a lot of time exploring that. And right near the end, Matt said, well, really what you do is people stuff. And it's all the dynamics around people. And that's what you do. I'm like, oh yeah. At first I was really annoyed because we spent 3 hours talking about something else. And then with Pete's encouragement, I'm like, yeah, actually that is really digestible. And that's really what I do. So there was a branding idea. And then there was this problem solving idea of what is it that people struggle with when it comes to people interactions. And that was the start of it.
Yeah. I actually really love the title because, you know, I've spent all my career in corporates, and it is what you hear a lot. It's like either said in a like dismissive, oh, that's people stuff, or it's we need to get our head around all the people stuff. And people stuff is used a lot where, you know, things like no one's sort of saying customer stuff or money stuff or risk management stuff, but it seems to be people stuff. And I think the fact stuff is like sometimes it is said in a dismissive way when it's the most bloody important stuff, isn't it?
Absolutely. You can't deliver on anything if you don't have the people dynamics nailed. And I think it's interesting how the word stuff resonates with people because it's so difficult sometimes to put your finger on what the issues are. And I think that's sort of what I try and unpack in the book is how can we look at the things that feel like we know there's trouble and challenges with it and we want to nail it down, but it's hard to do that. So I trying to offer some maps in the book to help people unpack some of those challenges.
Yeah. One of the, and this is like pretty early on in the book, you talk about as a leader dealing with people stuff, you can either react or respond. And I think the quote you said is it's this perspective is the gateway to change. And I love that because I think really good leaders make that decision all the time. Do I react here or do I respond? So can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Oh, sure. I think there's 3 levels of composure that come when it comes to leadership. And the first bottom level is reactive, and it's more impulsive. And I actually don't think that leaders think strategically about reacting. I think they just do. And what we've learned in neuroscience and through authors like Viktor Frankl, who wrote A Man's Search for Meaning, where he talks about there's a stimulus, an event, and then a response. In between that is a gap where we get to choose our response. And that's sort of the next layer of composure is being responsive. So reacting is just, knee-jerk reaction. And the responsiveness is insert pause, figure out what's most useful, and then choose a response. And then the top layer is really about being centered. And that's where, regardless of what's going on, you can always make a wise and compassionate decision with inner and outer peace. And that's the definition of spiritual intelligence by one of my favorite mentors and authors, Cindy Wigglesworth, who is also my favorite last name ever.
That is a brilliant last name. Why do you think, though? Because I would say in my experience, the vast majority of leaders react as opposed to responding. So what do you think why do we do that? And what is, I guess, the genuine challenges why they don't move up those layers and they predominantly stay in the react stage?
I think often leaders mistake it for intuition because they've got a body of experience and expertise. So they figure that I can make a snap decision, and our brains work well with that largely, where we've had that much experience. We have pattern recognition going on in our brains, and therefore we can jump to an effective conclusion. Why do leaders react and not develop the capacity for responsiveness? I think they actually, the ones that do are the ones that get hamstrung by their reactivity. So they make snap decisions and have it come bearing negative outcomes. And they figure out, I need to do something differently about this. I think there's also a move for leaders when they start getting more interested in self-awareness. Either they get given some really stringent feedback about the effect of their decision-making and their actions, which causes concern and desire for more introspection. So I think that's a catalyst for how people change. I think there's a maturity also that can lead to the desire for insert pause, respond, where leaders really do want to make a better decision as opposed to one that's just capitalized on their primary experience and expertise. And a better decision often requires a change of perspective. That's why I say perspective is the gateway to all change, good change. So the more that we can harness our perspective, the better we can make informed, responsive decisions. And that's sort of the whole premise of my book. Like, if people stuff, you to sum it up, apart from the people dynamics, the underneath the layer, the big word that sort of filters everything is perspective.
I think I love a good quote, and you have some very wise quotes in here. And this one I love. This needs to go on a coffee mug or a plate or something. And it's, when we change the way we look at things, things don't change, we do. And I think that's what the essence of the book is. How do we change our perspective and look at things differently? So that's got to be on a coffee mug, Zoe. I think that's got to be on a mouse pad. It's got to be on a coffee mug. It's got to be on, walls in airports, stuff like that. Because what I did, because I often, and I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about, you think it's a bit to do with maturity, and how much is that? Because I think if people are self-aware and if people are conscious of continually try to develop themselves, with maturity comes, and it's what I call comes wisdom with maturity. And it's the reason I gave the quote on the book is a must-read book to help you lead with wisdom, because I think we don't want to rely on maturity for wisdom. We don't want to go, well, that's only come with maturity, so I'll just be a dick for the next 20 years, and maybe when I'm 50, I'll be a bit wiser. So how much do you think, how much do you think really is maturity and getting older and wiser, as opposed to doing a lot of self-awareness and self-development?
Well, the way that I look at maturity is not through the lens of age. So I think we can definitely talk about that. As we grow older, there's some common patterns to it. And sometimes that correlates to the development of wisdom. And sometimes it totally does not. Yes. There's some very unwise elderly people. And then likewise, there's some very wise younger people. So when I think about maturity, I think more about the complexity of someone's thinking, being, and doing in the world. So that's the first clarification. And I forgot the rest of your question.
No, it was around self-awareness. Like, can you get, and I agree, it's maturity and wisdom is not just age, because you'll see some very young leaders who are very wise. Yep. It really was about, how you go about developing. So perhaps a different question is what work do you do? So tell us a little bit about the work you do in companies and with leaders to help them, change their perspective and become better leaders.
Yeah. So there's an element of the self-awareness piece. So essential to any leadership development, leadership maturity, personal maturity, is this development of understanding self. And so there's a chapter in the book that's all about you, meaning the self. How do we see ourselves? What kinds of maps and frameworks can we use to do personal investigation? And there's heaps of tools around that, whether it's personality profiling tools, whether it's a values assessment, which is one of the instruments that I use now, which does a map of your current value set and where that sits in comparison to your leadership maturity, and how effective your current value set and your leadership ego identity fits with the work that you're doing. So that's a diagnostic piece of work that I do that helps develop self-awareness. What I do to help organizations and teams develop their perspective is actually the practice of perspective. And the whole first chapter of People Stuff is about that. How do we expand our point of view? So it's about divergence, how wide, big picture, how far can we see into the future and past? What's the breadth of our considerations in terms of ripple effect? And what's the depth of our perspective? What are the complexities that we need to unpack beneath the surface level of the issues that are the systems and patterns and drivers that create those? So the practice of perspective is about zooming in and zooming out. So I teach them strategies and skills, and some of them are outlined in the book about how to do that, how to develop your perspective. And the other element is the wisdom and compassion piece, which balances out the big picture thinking as well as being able to take action in the moment. And so developing wisdom and compassion is another element of that. The compassionate piece is all about self-awareness and also emotional intelligence. The wisdom piece is about being able to make sensible decisions. So with all these options on the table, how do you weigh up your options? How do you make the best decision possible given what you know at the same time? So some of this is a diagnostic piece, some of it's a self-reflection piece, and some of it is a training activity. So an example was working with an organization this morning, and they're working to end homelessness, which is an amazing calling and vocation and movement, I guess, if you like. So what we did there, we unpacked a values hierarchy in terms of what was relevant to them, how they're showing up in their work, and what about their clients, where do their clients' values sit, and where are the tensions within those value sets. And then we did an exercise that I take from Richard Hames and his book, The 5 Literacies of Global Leadership, which is a systems thinking exercise where we look at the surface issues and then unpack all the things that are driving that. So we did a facilitated exercise. And with that, we looked at, okay, what are your strategic interventions that could change the outcome of the visible problem of homelessness? So that was a kind of fun piece of work this morning.
Yeah, that's an amazing piece of work, hopefully making a very big impact. So it sounds like, do you sort of work with clients over a longer term thing from the diagnostic? Is that normally how it works, or do you just come in and sometimes just run leadership development training?
With the organizations I work with, it tends to be in bite-sized chunks. Yep. So sometimes it's a starting point around strategy, and sometimes the starting point is around culture. I usually eventually end up doing both with the organization. So one of the organizations yesterday I worked with, their starting point is around team culture. So we did a facilitated exercise about understanding each other and what the dynamics are and what is the culture charter they want to have as an agreement of how to work. Once they do that piece of work, then they'll be looking at strategy. So how do we then implement what we've got on our plate effectively? So it does end up being over a long period of time, depending on the organization. So I have long-term relationships with a number of different organizations over a period of years. So sometimes it's facilitation work like that, the culture and strategy piece. And then sometimes it's bring me in and I'll train their frontline managers on the fundamentals of leadership, or I'll work with their executive and do some training around their strategic thinking capacities. So this sort of little bit of interventions, and quite often I will do executive coaching with the CEO as well. Right. So to help cement and solidify and keep progressing the work that they're doing as a collective.
So you do all the people stuff. You should write a book on that, which you did. Hey, I'm assuming if anyone wants to find out about the amazing work they can do, they can just head to your website, which is zoerouth.com. .au on the end of that?
.au, so that's right. Routh. It's Routh, like mouth with an R.
Yeah, it's mouth with an R. Zoe, mouth with an R.com. Hey, and where can people find the book? So obviously by your website, but where else can people find the book?
They can find it online at their favorite book retailers. It's in some bookstores around Australia, which is amazing. The audiobook is going to be available very soon. So that'll be out on all the audiobook platforms probably within the next week or so as well. Wow. So that was the whole
Is it you reading it?
It is me narrating the darn thing. And that was
well done.
Gig, I tell you.
Well done. I don't think I've never done an audio of my own books. I just don't. I don't know. I don't think I've got the voice for it. Or the patience, actually.
Well, it takes I think it's about 5.5 hours finished product of narrations for close to 50,000 words. So it does take a bit of time, and I didn't do it all in one hit. It was like, it's tough going. But you know what? Like, I would love to hear an audiobook by you, Routh, because when the author speaks their own words, there's a totally different resonance to it. Like when you're telling your own stories, you get such a rich depth of the whole story. So I listened to Michelle Obama's audiobook, her book Becoming, which is amazing, just hearing her speak about it. And you can hear her stories really come to life. And then I'm reading Mary Trump's book on Trump as well. And that's an interesting exercise as well. So yeah, I think throw down the gauntlet for you, Ral. You should narrate your next book.
Oh no, I've tried, but it took me about 10 attempts to read one page. It's just like, I think I'd have to ad lib. I think I'd have to just ad lib it and change it. But anyway, that can be done. I actually have listened to an audio book where they read a chapter and then they had a conversation about it, which I thought was actually pretty cool. That was a pretty cool way to do it.
Awesome. I would love to do that. I think that's a much better way to experience the book. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, that's exciting. The audiobook's coming out. So Zoe, thank you. Congratulations again. Like I said, I know from experience how amazing it felt to be a finalist last year and to win the award would be amazing, amazing, amazing. So well done. You are the guru of people stuff. So thanks for being part of it, and all the best for maybe the new book that comes out at some time soon.
Oh yeah, there'll be another book. And thank you, Ral, for being the headline quoter on the cover. I'm so grateful for your support and enthusiasm for the book. And I'm thrilled and honored to be here with you today too.
My pleasure.